It's very important to think about bankability, because if you think about a project, yes, there may be a city which has a large population, and that population isn't getting enough electricity. So at the sort of surface, it would seem like a good idea perhaps to put a power plant into that city. But there's a lot that goes between, that sort of very high level theoretical feasibility of that particular project and actually the sort of bankability, which means really being able to finance the project, being able to get lenders to come in and lend to the project.
When you go across Africa, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what infrastructure is required. I mean, you just travel and you will say, there needs a power station here. Oh, there needs a road here. Oh, there needs a bridge here. So that's why I say ideas are cheap. But to be then able to look at that idea and then see what are the challenges that has prevented such ideas from actually becoming investable ideas is what you need, where the role of AFC comes in. Because AFC, I think, has proven that it's capable of understanding what is required in terms of involving the various stakeholders to bring an idea to a level where investors can start looking at it.
As far as AFC goes, we try and address it in a number of ways. We have a team that works on project development because it involves things like negotiating with the contractors who are going to build it, because it involves things like negotiating with the government for the concession agreement, whatever that may be. The people who work on this tend to have operational experience. So they've worked for power companies, they've done these types of projects, they've worked for road companies, they understand what's needed, over and above people who are just financiers. So we have a pool of those operational people. We also have funds that can be put into this.
I mean, most of our projects are public-private partnership type projects, joint ventures between the public sector and the private sector. You need to have a good regulatory environment for the projects. You need to have the support of the government, if not in terms of financial support, but at least some indirect support.
I'll bring to some examples of that we've done, this participation in the Konambedie Bridge in Cote d'Ivoire. Here you would have to look at the cost of the deal. Of this infrastructure. You would also have to look at the returns it's going to offer. What is it, in fact, the traffic? Is this traffic going to be able to sustain and give you, not just to pay the debt, but also give the investors a fairly decent return? But in all of these deals also, you probably need the state or the government to come in and say, what can it do? Here was a good example where government itself participated in the deal by giving confidence to the investors and lenders by taking on the initial investments for the interchanges, and the roads are joining that. So that demonstrated confidence. It also was the fact that when we went in there, they were prepared to offer a traffic guarantee through a revenue sharing mechanism. This was also backstopped by MIGA in the end. For all of those reasons, you can see for a transport deal of that type, getting traffic analysis independently verified that could sustain the level of investment you're putting in, getting government to participate with what we call the enabling infrastructure, getting government as well to say, look, we will stand by this because we believe in it. It's a piece of infrastructure we think we need, and we are prepared to actually stand by those traffic figures and give it a backstop. That also was important. And you have this is just an example for a transport project, but it also could be applied in the power side, where if I'm dealing with a utility in Africa who wants to offtake this power, this IPP I put in there, surely then that utility, if it's not creditworthy, we would like to have some way in which it's backstopped by government, so that if the utility defaults and that default cannot be cured, then you're looking to government, and then government itself probably coming in with further backstop to a PRG mechanism.
If you're building a power station, you need to see where the input costs for that or the input materials from that will come from. So that needs assessment. You need to look at the supply chain to make sure that whatever you're assuming in terms of the input is going to come on time. Then it requires locating a relevant site that works well. Then it involves getting the right agreements in place, the power tariff agreements, or in more cases, what we find is the need for community involvement, because large infrastructure projects typically affect communities. So there is a huge need for a developer like us to make sure that the communities are briefed, they're supportive, and they actually see relevance in their lives with these projects. These are softer but highly, highly important issues, which ultimately proves to you whether a project is going to be bankable or not.
We see that actually one of the bottlenecks to more infrastructure in Africa isn't the financing, but is actually also, it's actually making the projects bankable so that the financing that's there can actually invest in those projects.